There's a question that keeps surfacing in every conversation about this war, and nobody in a position of authority wants to answer it directly. Why hasn't a single Israeli soldier set foot on Iranian soil? Not a commando raid, not a forward operating position. Nothing. The most sustained air campaign against any country since World War II, and it has stayed entirely airborne. Listen carefully to what Israeli officials say about ground operations and, more importantly, what they never say, and the answer reveals a strategic reality. Far more constrained than the public narrative suggests. Start with the numbers, because the numbers make the case before any other argument needs to be made. The IDF has approximately 170,000 active duty personnel. Before Iran even enters the conversation, roughly 95,000 of those are already committed to existing fronts: Gaza, the West Bank, Lebanon. That leaves around 75,000 theoretically available. Add reserves, Israel can mobilize approximately 465,000, except those reserves have already been cycled through mobilization repeatedly since October 2023. Tech sector productivity has collapsed as engineers rotate in and out of uniform. Public resistance to further call-ups is substantial and growing. But assume you somehow found 200,000 fresh troops, you are still mathematically short of what's required. Iran is 1.6 million square kilometers, 85 million people, to occupy even the western third, where the major population centers and critical infrastructure are concentrated. US military doctrine from Iraq and Afghanistan establishes a minimum force requirement of 500,000 troops for counterinsurgency operations. In hostile territory, Israel's entire reserve mobilization, committed entirely to Iran with nothing held back for any other front, doesn't reach that number. And the moment significant Israeli ground forces move east, every other front moves simultaneously. Hezbollah has been running harassment operations into northern Israel for over a year. Rocket fire, drone strikes, enough to keep IDF attention divided, not enough to commit their full capability. This is deliberate. Hezbollah has an estimated 100,000 fighters, even conservatively assuming only 30,000 are capable of sustained offensive operations. That's a ground force comparable in size to what Israel could maintain on the northern border while fighting elsewhere. Those fighters have spent 18 years since the 2006 war preparing for a specific scenario, the one where Israel's attention and reserves are pointed in the opposite direction. Anti-tank systems capable of destroying Merkava tanks, drones targeting Israeli logistics, tunnel networks enabling infiltration behind defensive lines. The moment a substantial portion of the IDF deploys into Iranian territory, Hezbollah's operational window opens in ways it hasn't since 1948. Israel cannot simultaneously field an Iran invasion force and hold the north. The force structure doesn't allow it. And if Hezbollah takes and holds even one Israeli town for 48 hours, even briefly, the political and psychological damage to Israel's security doctrine is catastrophic. The entire foundation of that doctrine rests on the principle that wars happen in enemy territory. Infantry doesn't stop at the Iron Dome. Now add the nuclear dimension, and the strategic trap becomes complete. Iran does not currently possess assembled nuclear weapons, but according to US intelligence assessments, it has enriched uranium, it has delivery systems, and it's weeks, perhaps a couple of months at most, from a working device if the political decision is made to build one. That decision has not been made. The restraint is deliberate and conditional. A ground invasion removes the condition. The moment Israeli troops are on Iranian soil, the Iranian government faces a genuine existential threat, the kind that historically produces exactly one calculation. History has repeatedly demonstrated what happens to governments confronting American or Israeli military force without nuclear deterrence. Iranian leadership has studied that history with care. If Israeli forces are crossing into Iran, the sprint to weaponization begins immediately, faster than any intelligence service can track, faster than any diplomatic intervention can intercept. And once Iran has dispersed, hardened nuclear weapons, Israel's ultimate strategic insurance, the Samson option, the unspoken doctrine that existential defeat triggers nuclear retaliation, is neutralized, because the moment Iran can strike back in kind, mutual assured destruction replaces Israeli deterrence. In that exchange, the arithmetic is brutal. Israel is 22,000 square kilometers with 9 million people concentrated in 3 major cities. Iran is 1.6 million square kilometers with 85 million people distributed across dozens of cities. A nuclear exchange between them is not symmetrical. Israel ceases to exist. Iran survives as a nation, even absorbing catastrophic losses. The trap closes on itself. Invasion triggers Iranian nuclear breakout. Nuclear breakout neutralizes Israeli deterrence. Without deterrence, Israel cannot survive a nuclear exchange. Therefore, ground invasion is the mechanism by which Israel triggers its own destruction. Israeli strategic planners understand this. It's why you hear consistent language about preventing Iranian nuclear capability and consistent silence about ground operations as the method. The United States has made its position explicit in private channels. Pentagon leadership, drawing on 2 decades of lessons from Iraq and Afghanistan, has told Israeli counterparts directly: airstrikes, intelligence sharing, missile defense, yes. Boots on the ground, staging from American bases, logistical support for an invasion. No Congress would not authorize it. American public opinion runs roughly 80% against another Middle East ground war. No administration survives sending American soldiers to die in Iran for an operation Americans overwhelmingly oppose. That withdrawal of support matters beyond politics. Israel's military is designed for short, high-intensity operations, weeks, maybe 2 months at maximum. Its logistics chain is not built for sustained ground operations hundreds of kilometers from home territory. In the 1973 war, American airlift was not a convenience. It was survival. That support will not materialize for an Iran invasion, which means Israeli supply lines would be strained from day one of any extended campaign. Then there's geography. Israel cannot reach Iran overland without transiting Jordan and Iraq, both of which would refuse and potentially respond with force. The aerial route for strike packages has run south over Saudi territory, which Riyadh has quietly permitted for limited airstrikes. A ground invasion is a categorically different request, and Saudi Arabia has communicated through diplomatic back channels that the answer is no overflight for transport aircraft, no staging, no logistical transit. The Saudi calculation is straightforward. They have spent years rebuilding a working relationship with Iran, reopening embassies in 2023, negotiating on Yemen and regional security. They are actively diversifying away from total American dependence, joining BRICS, signing agreements with China, positioning themselves as an independent regional power in what they correctly assess is a declining American hegemony. Being seen as complicit in an Israeli land invasion of Iran burns every relationship they have spent years building. At the exact moment those relationships matter most, Saudi Arabia's refusal is a hard stop that no amount of Israeli pressure can overcome, because Riyadh holds leverage over oil markets, over American relations that Israel cannot match. There is no viable ground route. The sea alternative, amphibious landing on the Iranian coast, would require a D-scale operation against heavily defended shoreline. Israel has no such capability and no allied force willing to provide it. So why does the bombing continue? Part of the answer is domestic. Netanyahu's political survival is built on projecting strength and decisive action, acknowledging that no military option exists that actually resolves the Iran problem, that the strikes are degrading capabilities Iran will rebuild, that the nuclear program will move deeper underground and disperse. Further, that in a year or two Iran returns to roughly where it started would collapse his government. The footage of precision strikes serves the domestic audience. It creates the appearance of a strategy even where the strategic ceiling is fixed. But there is a harder argument underneath the political one. Israel's current governing coalition includes factions whose framework for this conflict is not conventional military calculation. For the religious nationalist elements that hold real power in that coalition, the objective is not a definitive military victory followed by a negotiated settlement. The objective is sustained escalation. A conflict kept active, prevented from resolution, pushed forward toward a confrontation whose theological significance they believe transcends military outcome. Continued bombing serves that framework. A ground invasion would either fail in ways that end the government, or succeed in ways that require actually administering Iranian territory, which collapses the entire narrative. What you are watching is not a military campaign organized around achievable military objectives. It is two things operating simultaneously: political performance for a domestic audience, and a conflict kept deliberately unresolved by people who do not want it resolved. The air campaign is the instrument that serves both purposes without forcing the one confrontation boots on Iranian soil that the math, the nuclear equation, the American position, the Saudi geography, and the force structure all make impossible. The war stays in the air because it has nowhere else to go.